What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and this one I'm going to break down what's going on with Tsla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very important day as we have Nvidia's earnings, and also what's going on with the data dropping as we may see some high volatility during the first 15 and 30 minutes of the day for tomorrow. But before I break anything down with all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things before starting. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks plus a $50 cash reward. The offer ends in just about 9 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Anyways, looking at the market right now, things are very interesting with all the volatility coming because of Nvidia. And the question is, how will the market move going forward? And will Nvidia end up getting this very, very nice balance after its earnings comes out? But right now, the market is very indecisive. The market does not know which way it wants to go because things are looking very tight, and the market's getting ready for a very big move after the market closes tomorrow. And that's why I want to break down some levels to watch for to help dictate which way the market will go. And I'm also going to talk about this for Nvidia and all these different tickers. But first, let's talk about the market. What happened today? So we had something new that came out as the S&P Global ended up cutting the credit ratings for some of its banks out there, which caused the financial sector to see some downside here and there as some banks ended up dropping from JP Morgan Chase, not to mention like a couple of others. But with that happening, this was a little bit negative for the market. Not to mention that some retail earnings were not too good either, from Dick's Sporting Goods to Macy's, dropping 24 and 14% after cutting their one-year forecasts. This is very important for the retail sector, and this was not some good news that came out. That's part of why the market underperformed a bit, but there are other things affecting it as well. Now, for the market, we're not essentially like super fearful just yet, at least overall. We're kind of neutral overall. We're not extremely fearful, but we're going to see if this ends up changing after all these earnings end up dropping and if we see anything from Jerome Powell later on during the week. Now, market momentum is still a little bit less greedy than before, nothing too crazy. Same thing with the stock price strength index. It's still a little bit greedy, but way less greedy than before. We're starting to see the current summation index becoming more fearful as we're starting to see sellers coming back and sentiment shifting. Now, the put and call options right now are kind of like dropping a little bit right over there as we're seeing some puts being closed, but the market is still fearful overall and it still is very, very apprehensive. So you have to be very careful to see how Nvidia ends up affecting this. Could this cause fear to go up even more, or will this end up causing the opposite? That's going to be very important. And the market volatility is still above the 50-day moving average as the VIX is holding up decently. We're going to find out if the VIX ends up dropping or not, and that's going to have a big effect on at least the overall views right now. The VIX is just a really good measure of how fearful the market is and also the current implied volatility. We will see if anything changes thanks to that, and the market will dictate that too. So for the next, upcoming day, we have Kohl's announcing earnings. So is Foot Locker, but nothing too big until we have Nvidia. Nvidia will be announcing their earnings after the market closes for tomorrow, and they're going to cause a very, very big move, in my opinion. The market's getting set for that, and once you guys see the QQQ, it's going to make a lot of sense. Now, just as a reminder, tomorrow before the market opens, it's not just going to be about Nvidia, but we also have some data coming out. We have the PMI reports coming out, the S&P 500 global manufacturing, the global services, and the global composite all coming out. These are just basically different measures about how the different sectors in the economy are doing, which could cause some volatility during the first 15 minutes. Then we have new home sales after that, after another 15 minutes. So for the first 15 and 30 minutes of the day tomorrow, expect some volatility with the data dropping. And besides that, I think the data is going to be clear for the rest of the day until we get to like Thursday and Friday. So once again, this is going to be some significant catalyst, at least to start us off. And we're going to be watching the volatility just as we start. Now, as Nvidia approaches its earnings, could this thing drop even more approaching it? That does happen historically, but at the same time, is it going to bounce and just get a little bit of excitement and last minute FOMO before the market ends up seeing the big move? And honestly, guys, I'm not 100% sure about that because right now we're just barely sitting at support and the market is super indecisive. The market's getting ready for a big move. It just doesn't know which way it's going to go. Because what happened to Nvidia is it got very tight right now. It's very, very tight. You can see right here. If it tries to break out thanks to FOMO, you want to watch it break above 460. If it breaks that, you're going to be watching 462, 465, then 470 being retested on this thing. And we have some very strong resistance around this 480 area. So watch it very carefully. If it ends up breaking down, right, you could like argue that's like flagging right here. We have like a potential bearish structure. It is looking a little bit more bearish, but just to be safe, we want to see it break below support. You're going to be watching 452. If 452 breaks on Nvidia, it's going to be testing like 450 or so, and if that breaks 446, 442, and all these different levels are going to start, being tested. 450 especially is going to be a big one, but 452 is the like actual level to watch for. If this thing ends up sinking, we're going to see some more downside for the whole market before the earnings comes out. Right now, it's very difficult for me to tell you which way it's going to go. I know historically it does, like it could slow down approaching earnings, but I'm not going to make any calls just yet until I see the direction because it's very tight right now. It's very indecisive. We don't know which way it's going to go. It's not really picking a direction, and that's going to dictate the whole market. Unfortunately, the same thing is going on throughout the market. The market is just so indecisive. It doesn't know which way to go. On Tesla, same thing. It's just getting tighter and tighter and tighter, not really breaking out, not really picking a direction. And we could readjust this just a tiny bit, but the bottom line is it's just stuck right now. It's not really doing anything too big. It's just super, super tight. If Tesla breaks and holds 235, there's potential for 238. And if that breaks, 240 is on the table. Uh, but if it ends up breaking down tomorrow, right before Nvidia's earnings, you're going to be watching 230 and levels below that. If it breaks 230, 228 and then 225 are all possibilities. Now, I'm not really fixated in either direction because even if we do drop, we could always make a big pop after Nvidia's earnings, or the opposite could happen. Even if we hold these levels, we could always get a rug pull thanks to Nvidia. I don't know for sure. So for now, we're just going to be seeing which direction it breaks in on this wedge tomorrow, and we're going to see which way it tries to head towards. We just need to be open-minded because the market is indecisive. Now, the most telling thing is the QQQ, which I'm going to show you in just a few minutes. But first, let's talk about SPY. On SPY, it's also looking a little bit indecisive. Just like the QQQ, there are like two interpretations of this. Could this be, in my opinion, like a giant inverse head and shoulders that's about to play out? Could that be it? Or is this a giant head and shoulders, right? It could be either one of them. So you could argue that, for instance, this right here could be a giant inverse head and shoulders that's playing out, and this thing is going to get set for a very, very nice bounce. You could argue that on SPY right now, this thing's about to get a bounce thanks to Nvidia. It's going to start pushing up later on, trying to make its way back up. That is like the more bullish possibility. And this is a real possibility with 444 being major resistance. However, hold on a second. At the same time, you could also argue that there's a head and shoulders developing right here, and that's, wait a minute, what if this right here is like a head and shoulders? What if we formed like this left shoulder like right here, and then this right here is the head, and we're about to get one more pop like this, unless this is the pop or not, and then we get a rug pull after Nvidia's earnings, and this thing just starts sinking all the way down like this, right after the earnings come out. That's like the more bearish case. That's also very possible, uh, and that could end up playing out as well. We could have this bearish case play out as well for this. So could go either way. How are we going to know which way it's going to go? Well, one thing I just want to mention is that it was very sideways, very flat at the end of the day today. If it breaks above 439, you're going to be watching 440. If those levels break, it's going to start pushing for like 442 plus. Okay, that's a real possibility. And if 442 breaks, 444 is a possibility too. But you want to see it hold above 439 and just continue to see good volume, bullish technicals. That's going to be your bullish case. If it breaks below 437.5 tomorrow, right? Maybe it's like after the market closes or even during market open hours. If 437.5 breaks, you're going to be watching 436. And if that ends up failing us, it's going to likely sink to the 435s all the way down to this low down here to 435.3, if not lower levels than that. So there's both a bull and bear case. You could even argue that this could be like a left shoulder, this could be a head and like the right shoulder still forming. Either way, I mean, like I said before, you just want to watch the levels. That's the best thing I can tell you right now because the market is just so indecisive. It just chopped for half the day, didn't really do anything. So we're going to be watching which level ends up breaking either before or after Nvidia's earnings. Now on SPX, we were talking about this formation, right? This possible head and shoulders that could be forming. And for now, when we zoom out on the 30 minutes time frame right here, it came very close to forming that right shoulder on the Head and Shoulders. If this is the case on SPX, it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes right shoulders could be a little bit like weaker. I don't know for sure if we're going to go a little higher or not. I don't know if we're going to end up breaking out to the upside or if we just end up establishing this Head and Shoulders and the market starts sinking. They're both very possible, and it's going to depend on Nvidia's earnings and Jackson Hole, because at Jackson Hole, that's when Jerome Powell is going to be speaking. But one of the most telling things I can show you is the QQQ. This has both bullish and bearish cases at the same time. It is ready for a massive move. So what do I mean by that? Well, when you zoom out, okay, this right here could be like an inverse Head and Shoulders. Hopefully it's not too hard to see. Let me see if I can show you this. I can't show you this without having all my like trend lines drawn out. But basically, hopefully this is not too messy, and I do apologize for that. But this could be a left shoulder. This could be like the right shoulder forming. This whole thing could be a giant inverse Head and Shoulders, and the market could start pushing and pushing, and we could see this thing push up to the 370s, right? After Nvidia's earnings to fill this gap up here, there is a bullish case. But just like SPY, there's also this bearish case right here, which would be, let me make this red for a second, which is like we have our Head and Shoulders also developing. We have a left shoulder ahead. The right shoulder could be forming. We could be set for a big rug pull after Nvidia's earnings. It could go either way, to be honest with you. It could go either way. I don't know which one is going to play out. It depends on Nvidia. If the QQQ breaks and holds 365, there's a good chance it could start pushing up and this inverse Head and Shoulders could play out, right? If we break and hold 365, we have to also break like 368, for example. We could start a nice push to the 370s. If we don't do that, if we just chop around and we end up breaking below 362, if 362 breaks, this thing can start pushing down to 360, then 357 below that. The red trend line can play out. So you're going to be watching 362 as support and then 365 as resistance. It could go either way. All right, so be open-minded with that. Same thing with Aapl. Aapl is also dictating this market. Aapl held up quite decently today. However, despite all the news that came out, if Aapl continues to break out, I'm going to question this formation because we have a rising wedge on Aapl. If Aapl gets a rug pull later on, the market could sink, but we're going to be watching to see if this plays out or not. Now, going into tomorrow, if Aapl holds above 177.5, you're going to be watching this thing push up for 178 and potentially even 180 if it keeps going. But if it maintains this rising wedge, I'm going to be very apprehensive. If it breaks below it, you're going to be watching it retest 176.5. If that fails us, watch 176. If that also fails us, it's going to come all the way down to fill the gap and start pushing down to the 175s, if not the 174s, and start breaking down, which is going to sink the market. So watch this rising wedge on Aapl. Does this end up playing out? Do we get a rug pull, or does Aapl try to hold up? This does tell me there's a possibility Nvidia or Jerome Powell could cause a rug pull later on, just looking at this rising wedge. So I see this as a red flag. Be very careful with this and just watch and see if we break below it or not. So with that said, I think I'm just going to keep it short from here. Nvidia is not looking that great. We want to see if this thing could hold these particular levels. Once again, for Nvidia, it's very important to watch. Very important supports. I think I forgot to mention this about it. 450 is going to be important support. 450 to 452. It's very indecisive, by the way. I want to see if that holds. If that fails on Nvidia, it's going to come sinking once again down to these like 446 areas, 442 and beyond. If it tries to break 460, like I said before, there's 462, 465, and 470 as resistances. It may try to hold around these levels for the time being. We're going to see which way it breaks tomorrow in the morning. But then don't forget, after earnings comes out, that's when we see a much larger move. Are we going to sink before earnings like it has done in the past? It could, but we have to see it break below support. It has to break below 450 for it to really sink. If it breaks above 460 and holds it, it could start pushing a lot. So just watch and see which way it goes. That's going to dictate the market and see what happens after earnings. All right, so I'm just going to go over just a couple of others before I end this video. The dollar has a bearish divergence developing, which is like very mixed. If this ends up playing out and the dollar starts coming down back to like 103.34, that could pump the markets. But what's a little concerning is the VIX. Looks like it has potential to, it also has potential to drop. So that makes me think that this thing might also cause, or at least it may drop because of the market potentially pumping. It has a bearish divergence as well. So this might come down to about this like 16.5 area, which means the market could get a bounce tomorrow because of that. But I'm not really promising that. It's going to depend more on Nvidia's earnings. And besides that, I mean, for most of these different tickers, they're very tight. You're gonna be watching to see if Google could break 130. If not, if it doesn't break below 128, that will dictate the much bigger move. For Amazon, does it break above 135? If it does so, it could push for 137, or does it break below 134? Because then it's going to sink to 132. And for Meta, could this thing break and hold 290? If it does so, it could push for 293, then potentially 296, or does it break below 285? If it does so, it could push all the way down to 280 flat. So watch support and resistance very carefully. Do what you have to do. The market is very indecisive, getting ready for a big move thanks to Nvidia. And the best thing to do is just watch which level breaks and to be as patient as possible as we approach the big events. All right, so thank you for listening. Hopefully, this video was helpful. Remain calm, cool, and collected, and I'll see you guys in the next one. The market to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright, and peace out.